The rain fell in a cold, steady curtain over the quiet streets of Summerville, South Carolina, turning the asphalt into a black mirror that reflected every street lamp in smeared ribbons of light. It was a Tuesday evening in late autumn, the kind of night when the town seemed to hold its breath between the last of the dinner hour and the deep quiet of sleep. Ruth Ellison, 72 years old and a retired pediatric nurse, guided her 2008 Honda Accord through the familiar neighborhood with the unhurried confidence of someone who had driven these roads for decades. A Tupperware container of warm peach cobbler sat on the passenger seat, destined for her neighbor across the street. She hummed a low gospel hymn under her breath, the same one she had sung for years while bandaging scraped knees and calming feverish children at the community center, where she still volunteered every Tuesday without fail. Ruth was the kind of woman people measured time by. She had sat in the same pew at First Baptist Church of Summerville every Sunday for 40 years. Her silver hair was pulled into a neat bun, her hands steady on the wheel despite the arthritis that had settled into her knuckles like an old, unwelcome guest. She was a pillar of the town, and she carried herself with the quiet dignity that came from a life spent caring for others. The sudden flare of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror shattered the calm. Ruth checked her speedometer, exactly 25 miles per hour. She signaled carefully, eased the car to the curb beneath a flickering street lamp, shifted it into park, and switched on the interior dome light. Both hands rested at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, exactly the way she had taught her son years earlier. Two figures stepped out of the Summerville police cruiser. The lead officer, Grant Holloway, was a broad-shouldered man in his early 30s whose reputation preceded him in the poorer neighborhoods of town, a man known for a short fuse and a loose reading of the rights he was sworn to protect. His partner, a younger, nervous-looking rookie named Shane Porter, flanked the passenger side. Holloway rapped his heavy flashlight against Ruth's window. The sharp clack, clack, clack made her flinch. She rolled the window down, a polite smile already in place over the quiet rise of anxiety. "Evening, officer," she said, her voice smooth and respectful. "Is there a problem?" "License, registration, and proof of insurance." Holloway's voice was a bark. He shone the 1,000-lumen flashlight straight into her eyes. Ruth blinked hard, raising a thin hand to shield her face. "Officer, the light is very bright. My registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for it now, all right?" "I didn't tell you to reach for anything." Holloway's hand dropped to the holster at his hip. "Step out of the vehicle." Ruth hesitated. The rain was coming harder now, and the damp cold settled into her joints like a warning. "Officer, I'm 72 years old. I haven't done anything wrong. Could you please tell me why I was pulled over? You have a busted passenger side taillight, and you're failing to comply with a lawful order." Holloway leaned in close enough for her to smell the stale coffee and chewing tobacco on his breath. "Step out of the car, or I will remove you from it." What Holloway did not know was that Ruth's phone sat unlocked in the cup holder. Before she unbuckled her seatbelt, her trembling thumb brushed the screen and pressed the speed dial contact labeled simply, "Mason, emergency." The phone vibrated once, a silent connection, before it slipped from her fingers and wedged deep into the narrow gap between the center console and the driver's seat. "I am stepping out, officer. Please, there's no need for this." Ruth pushed the door open with a heavy sigh. The moment her orthopedic shoes touched the wet pavement, Holloway seized her left arm. He did not simply hold it, he wrenched it upward with a brutal, tearing force. Ruth cried out as her rotator cuff gave way with a sharp pop. "Stop resisting!" Holloway shouted. The phrase practiced, performed for the dash camera facing them. "I'm not resisting. You're hurting me." Ruth's knees buckled as he shoved her hard against the side of her own car. Her cheek smashed against the cold, wet metal of the roof. Porter jogged around the front of the vehicle. "Grant, hey, take it easy, man. She's an old lady." "Shut up, rookie. Watch her hands." Holloway swept Ruth's legs out from under her. The 72-year-old woman hit the asphalt with a sickening thud. The impact drove the air from her lungs. A blinding pain shot through her collarbone as it fractured under the weight of the officer's knee pressed into her upper back. Cold rain mixed with the warm blood trickling from a gash above her eyebrow. "Hands behind your back! Give me your hands!" Holloway roared, yanking her already dislocated shoulder backward to force the cold steel cuffs onto her wrists. She could not breathe. The weight of the man on her spine was crushing the air from her bruised lungs. Deep inside the Honda, wedged beside the seat track, the active cell phone broadcast every scream, every sickening crack of bone, and every cruel word across an encrypted satellite network halfway around the world. 7,000 miles away, in the desolate, wind-scoured mountains of a classified overseas operating base, Master Sergeant Mason Ellison sat on a metal folding chair, methodically cleaning his customized Sig Sauer MCX. The room glowed with the harsh, sterile light of tactical fluorescence. Mason was a ghost, a highly decorated operator in the Army's most elite and secretive counterterrorism unit. Standing 6'3" and built like a vault door, he possessed eyes that missed nothing. He had survived hellscapes in Syria, Afghanistan, and places that did not officially exist on any map. He was trained to dismantle insurgencies, eliminate high-value targets, and remain utterly dispassionate in the face of chaos. His singular anchor to humanity was his mother, Ruth. On the metal table beside his spare magazines, his encrypted satellite phone buzzed. The screen flashed. "Incoming call. Mom." Mason frowned. It was past midnight in South Carolina. Ruth was a devout woman who went to bed by 9 every night without fail. A call at this hour meant only one thing. He tapped the screen and brought the device to his ear. "Mom?" There was no answer, only the sound of heavy rain striking a windshield, the rhythmic thump of wipers, and then shouting. Mason stopped breathing. His hands froze over the dismantled rifle. Through the static, he heard a man's aggressive voice. "Stop resisting!" Then came the sound that would permanently alter the trajectory of Mason Ellison's life. A scream, high, sharp, and laced with pure terror. It was his mother. "I'm not resisting. You're hurting me." Mason's heart rate did not spike. It plummeted. A cold, absolute ice flooded his veins, a physiological response conditioned by years of Tier 1 combat stress. He did not yell. He did not panic. He simply hit the record button on his tactical communications unit and listened. He heard the scuffle, the hollow thud of a human body striking pavement, the distinct snap of bone. He heard the second voice, younger and nervous. "Grant. Hey, take it easy, man. She's an old lady." "Shut up, rookie. Watch her hands." He heard the metallic ratcheting of handcuffs. He heard his mother gasping for air, her voice a fragile, broken whisper. "Please, I can't breathe." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you resisted arrest, Grandma." The line went dead. Mason sat in silence for exactly 5 seconds. He replayed the audio in his mind, cataloging every acoustic detail. A police cruiser's engine in the background, the sound of handcuffs, 2 male voices, the name Grant. Then he stood. He did not reassemble his rifle. He walked out of the barracks and straight into the command tent. His commanding officer, Major Quinn Barrett, looked up from a map table the moment Mason entered. The major stopped speaking instantly. He knew that look. "Master Sergeant?" Barrett asked carefully. "I need immediate emergency leave, sir. A stateside extraction." Mason's voice was flat, stripped of every emotion. That absence of feeling was what made it terrifying. "Is your mother all right, Mason?" "No, sir." "I'll have you on a C-17 transport headed to Joint Base Andrews in 20 minutes. You're off the board, Ellison. Take all the time you need." 18 hours later, Mason stepped out of a rented Ford F-150 in the parking lot of Somerville Medical Center. He wore a dark gray tactical jacket, dark jeans, and hiking boots. He carried no weapons. The way he walked, measured, silent, scanning every corner and exit, made people instinctively step aside. During the flight, he had not slept. He had plugged his phone into an encrypted laptop and run a frequency analysis on the audio. He isolated the voices, then cross-referenced public municipal records with Somerville police dispatch logs for the night of the incident. It had taken him less than 3 hours to identify the officers on duty, Grant Holloway and Shane Porter. He pulled their service records, home addresses, financial histories, and disciplinary files. What he found turned the ice in his veins into something far darker. Holloway carried 4 excessive force complaints in the previous 2 years, all mysteriously dropped, all involving minority citizens, all signed off by a Captain Royce Harrington. Mason pushed through the sliding glass doors of the hospital. The storm had not broken. It was only gathering strength. The intensive care unit smelled of iodine and bleached linen. The rhythmic beep of a heart monitor was the only sound in the dimly lit room when he walked in. He stopped at the foot of the bed. The sight before him threatened to crack the iron wall of his military discipline. Ruth lay under a thin white blanket. Her left arm was heavily cast and strapped across her chest to stabilize a shattered collarbone. The right side of her face was a canvas of deep purple and black bruising. Her eyes were swollen completely shut. A jagged row of stitches crossed her eyebrow. An oxygen tube rested beneath her nose, helping her bruised lungs draw breath around 2 fractured ribs. Mason moved to the side of the bed. Hands that had dismantled explosive devices and ended lives now wrapped, with feather-light tenderness, around her uninjured hand. Ruth stirred. Her good eye fluttered open. It took a moment for her to focus. When she did, a single tear spilled over the bridge of her nose. "Mason," she rasped, her voice weak and rattling in her chest. "I'm here, Mama. I'm right here." His voice was a low, soothing rumble that hid the inferno raging beneath the surface. "I didn't do anything wrong, baby," she whispered, her chin trembling. "I was just trying to get my registration. I was just coming home from the center." "I know, Mama. I know you didn't. I heard the whole thing." Her eye widened in sudden fear. "Mason, listen to me. The men who did this, they're police. They have badges. You are a good boy. You serve your country. Don't you ruin your life trying to fix this. Promise me you won't do anything crazy. God will handle them." Mason leaned down and pressed his forehead against her unbruised cheek. He inhaled the faint scent of peppermint and lavender that always clung to her, now masked by the sterile smell of the hospital. "I promise I won't do anything crazy, Mama," he whispered. "I'm going to do this exactly by the book." He did not tell her that in his book, you did not simply eliminate a threat. You dismantled the entire infrastructure that had allowed it to exist. After arranging for a private security guard, a former ranger buddy who lived in Charleston, to post outside her door, Mason left the hospital. The Somerville Police Department was a low brick building from the 1970s, tucked between a pawn shop and a diner. Mason walked through the double doors and approached the bulletproof glass of the front desk. The desk sergeant, a balding man chewing a toothpick, did not look up from his monitor. "Can I help you? I'm here for the arrest report and the dash cam and body cam footage for an incident that occurred last night, the arrest of Ruth Ellison." The sergeant stopped chewing. He finally looked up, eyes narrowing as he took in Mason's imposing frame and cold stare. "Are you family?" "I'm her son." The sergeant leaned back in his chair. "That case is an active investigation. Your mother assaulted 2 police officers and resisted arrest. You can't just walk in here and demand evidence." Mason did not blink. He did not raise his voice. He leaned a fraction of an inch closer to the glass. Under the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act, initial incident reports are subject to public disclosure upon request. Provide the report. The sergeant glared, intimidated despite the glass. He picked up his desk phone and dialed an extension. "Captain, the Ellison woman's son is out here causing a disturbance." A moment later, the heavy metal door beside the front desk buzzed open. Captain Royce Harrington stepped into the lobby. He was a man in his 50s, carrying an extra 40 pounds around his midsection, wearing a tailored uniform that could not conceal his arrogance. He looked Mason up and down, sizing him up and clearly underestimating what stood before him. "Mr. Ellison," Harrington said smoothly, offering a patronizing smile. "I'm Captain Harrington. I'm sorry about your mother's injuries, but she brought them on herself. She was highly uncooperative and struck Officer Holloway during a routine traffic stop. Our officers used approved suppression techniques to secure the scene." "Approved suppression techniques," Mason repeated, tasting the bureaucratic lie. "A 72-year-old woman with arthritis struck a 200-pound police officer. Adrenaline makes people do crazy things," Harrington replied without missing a beat. "I suggest you get a lawyer and prepare for her arraignment. She's facing felony assault charges. I want the body cam footage." Harrington's smile thinned into something oily. "Well, that's the unfortunate part. It was raining heavily last night, caused a short in the equipment. Both Officer Holloway and Officer Porter experienced simultaneous equipment malfunctions. The dash cam was obstructed by the weather, so it's their word against hers, and judges around here tend to believe the badge." Mason stared at him. He cataloged the micro-expressions, the slight twitch of the jaw, the avoidance of direct eye contact, the rehearsed cadence of the lie. This was not simply a cover-up of a bad arrest. This was systemic. This was a precinct that had grown comfortable burying its sins without consequence. "Simultaneous malfunctions," Mason said softly. "Tragic coincidence," Harrington replied. "Now, if you don't mind, we have real crimes to solve. Have a good day, Mr. Ellison." Harrington turned his back and walked away, expecting the intimidated civilian to leave in frustration. Mason did not leave frustrated. He left illuminated. As he walked back to his truck, he pulled out his encrypted phone. He did not call a lawyer. He called a contact at Fort Meade, a cyber intelligence analyst who owed him his life from a botched operation in Fallujah. "Hey, it's Mason," he said into the receiver as he started the engine. "I need you to access the Somerville Police Department's internal server, specifically the secure cloud backup for their Axon body cameras. Look for deleted files stamped between 8 and 10 p.m. last night." "You want me to breach a domestic police database, Mason? That's highly illegal." The voice on the other end already carried the sound of rapid typing. "They said the cameras malfunctioned. I know they deleted the footage. And while you're at it, run the financials on Captain Royce Harrington and Officer Grant Holloway. Check for offshore accounts, shell corporations, or unexplained cash deposits. These guys aren't just arrogant. They're sloppy." Mason put the truck in gear and pulled slowly out of the parking lot, trailing 3 car lengths behind Holloway's cruiser as it left the station. The hunter was officially in the woods, and the prey had no idea they were already in the crosshairs. Room 114 of the Pinecrest Motor Lodge sat on the outskirts of Somerville, a cheap establishment whose neon sign buzzed with a dying, flickering hum. Within 3 hours of checking in, Mason had transformed the dingy space into a localized tactical operations center. The curtains were drawn tight and secured with black tactical tape. His encrypted laptop sat on the cheap laminate desk, hardwired into a portable military-grade satellite uplink. Printouts of financial records, duty rosters, and precinct blueprints covered the 2 double beds. At 2:00 a.m., the laptop chimed with a secure incoming connection. It was Logan Pierce, his cyber contact operating out of Fort Meade. "Talk to me," Mason said, voice a low, gravelly whisper, eyes locked on the screen. "Mason, your local police department has the cybersecurity of a middle school computer lab," Pierce replied, the rapid clacking of a mechanical keyboard echoing over the line. They used a standard Axon Enterprise cloud server for their Bodycam uploads. When someone deletes a file from the main interface, it doesn't actually vanish. It goes into a hidden administrative recycling bin for 30 days pending a server wipe. I bypassed their 2-factor authentication, spoofed Captain Harrington's credentials, and pulled the trash. Do you have it?" I have it. Sending the encrypted packet to your terminal now. Prepare yourself. It's exactly what you thought. A progress bar flashed across Mason's screen, followed by a raw MP4 file. He double-clicked the icon. The screen went black for a second before the chaotic, rain-streaked footage from Officer Grant Holloway's body camera flared to life. Mason watched with an emotionless, terrifying stillness. He watched the 1,000-lumen flashlight blind his mother. He watched her polite, trembling compliance. He watched Holloway grab her thin arm, watched the brutal, unnecessary takedown, and heard the sickening snap of her collarbone. The visual confirmation of the assault was infinitely worse than the audio alone, but Mason's heart rate remained a flat, steady 60 beats per minute. He was no longer a son grieving his mother's pain. He was a Tier 1 operator analyzing a hostile target's tactics. I have it, Mason said, jaw locked tight. What about the financials? That's where this goes from a civil rights violation to a federal RICO case, Pierce said, his tone shifting from casual to deadly serious. Harrington and Holloway aren't just dirty cops. They're running a municipal syndicate. Over the last 4 years, they've seized more than $2 million in cash from highway stops using civil asset forfeiture laws. The cash goes into the precinct's evidence room, but my audit shows only 20% of it makes it to the city's general fund. The rest is being funneled into shell companies registered in Delaware under the names of Harrington's brother-in-law and Holloway's cousin. They're washing drug money and shaking down citizens. Send me the ledgers, every single transaction. Sent. What's the play here, Mason? You want me to forward this to the DOJ? I can have the FBI field office in Charleston swarming that precinct by sunrise. No, Mason replied smoothly, disconnecting the satellite uplink cable. Not yet. If the FBI raids them now, Harrington lawyers up, the union protects Holloway, and they drag this out in court for 3 years. I want them to feel the terror my mother felt on that asphalt. I'm going to dismantle them from the inside out. Mason closed the laptop. It was time to introduce Officer Grant Holloway to the consequences of his actions. At 4:15 a.m., the suburban neighborhood where Holloway lived was dead silent. The rain had slowed to a miserable drizzle. Holloway's house was a modest single-story ranch with a 2-car garage. Mason approached the back of the property, moving with the complete absence of sound that had once allowed him to slip past armed sentries in the Syrian desert. He bypassed the motion sensors by mapping their blind spots, stepped onto the back patio, and pulled a set of tension tools from his pocket. It took him 14 seconds to pick the deadbolt on the reinforced back door. He slipped inside. The house smelled of stale beer and cheap cologne. A dog snored in a crate in the laundry room. Mason had already tossed a piece of sedative-laced steak through the window vent 10 minutes earlier. The golden retriever was deeply, safely asleep. Moving like a shadow, Mason navigated the dark hallway. He could hear the heavy rhythmic breathing of Holloway sleeping in the master bedroom. Mason did not pull a weapon. He did not intend to harm Holloway physically, not tonight. Delta Force specialized in psychological warfare, breaking an enemy's mind before ever firing a shot. Mason stood at the foot of Holloway's bed, watching the man who had shattered his mother's bones. It would have been so easy to end it right there, but he had a promise to keep to Ruth. He was doing this by the book, his book. With practiced microscopic movements, Mason reached onto the nightstand. Holloway's service weapon, a Glock 19, rested next to his alarm clock. In absolute silence, Mason depressed the magazine release, catching the heavy clip in his palm. He racked the slide back, catching the chambered round in mid-air before it could strike the wooden table. Then, with terrifying speed and precision, he field-stripped the weapon in the dark. The slide, the barrel, the recoil spring, and the frame were laid out in a neat, perfect row next to the officer's pillow. In the center of the disassembled weapon, Mason placed a high-resolution printed photograph of his mother's brutally bruised face. Before leaving, he wired a small, untraceable Bluetooth speaker behind the bedroom television, syncing it to a timer on his phone. He walked out exactly as he had come in, locking the door behind him and leaving no physical trace of forced entry. At exactly 5:29 a.m., 1 minute before Holloway's alarm was set to sound, the Bluetooth speaker activated. It did not play music. It played the isolated audio of the Bodycam footage, cranked to maximum volume. "Stop resisting. Shut up, rookie. Watch her hands," followed by the agonizing scream of Ruth Ellison. Holloway jolted violently awake, thrashing in his sheets, his hand instinctively slapping the nightstand for his Glock. His fingers found only cold, disassembled pieces of metal. He scrambled to turn on the bedside lamp, chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face. The audio looped endlessly. He looked down and saw his ruined gun. Then he saw the photograph of the old woman, her swollen black eye staring up at him. Holloway screamed, tearing the television from the wall to find the speaker and crushing it under his boot. He backed into the corner of his bedroom, shaking violently, staring at the locked door. In that agonizing, terrifying moment, he realized someone had stood over him while he slept, someone who could have easily killed him, but had chosen instead to send a message. He was being hunted. Officer Shane Porter's hands were shaking so badly, he spilled hot coffee over the rim of his porcelain mug, staining the cheap paper placemat. It was 11 p.m. the following night. The diner was a neon-lit relic sitting on a lonely stretch of highway just outside the Somerville city limits. Porter was off duty, wearing a gray hoodie, staring out the rain-slicked window into the empty parking lot. He had not slept in 2 days. The sound of Ruth Ellison's collarbone snapping replayed in his mind every time he closed his eyes. The bell above the diner door chimed. Porter did not look up until a large shadow fell over his booth. Mason slid into the vinyl seat across from the young rookie. He did not order anything. He simply sat, his massive frame radiating a quiet, crushing gravity. Porter finally looked up. He did not recognize Mason, but every instinct in his body screamed that the man sitting across from him was dangerous. "Booth's taken, buddy." "No, it isn't, Shane," Mason said, his voice low, calm, and terrifyingly polite. "Drink your coffee. We need to talk about Tuesday night." Porter froze. His hand moved instinctively toward his waistband, where his off-duty piece rested. Mason did not flinch. "I wouldn't do that. By the time your hand clears your belt, I will break your wrist in 3 places. And then we'll have to finish this conversation in an alley. Keep your hands on the mug." Porter swallowed hard, eyes wide. He kept both hands wrapped around the warm porcelain. "Who are you?" "I'm Ruth Ellison's son." The remaining color drained from Porter's face. He looked as if he were going to be sick. "Listen, man, I didn't want that to happen. Grant, he's out of his mind. He's got a temper. I tried to tell him to back off." "You did," Mason agreed smoothly. "I heard the audio. I also watched the body cam footage that Captain Harrington tried to delete." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, and laid it on the table. He hit play. The brutal video played on the small screen. Porter looked away, squeezing his eyes shut. "Look at it," Mason commanded, the sudden sharp authority in his voice leaving no room for defiance. Porter opened his eyes and watched the screen. A tear slipped down his cheek. "I swear to God, I didn't touch her. I froze. If I go against Grant, they'll ruin my career. They might even kill me. You don't know how things work in this town." "I know exactly how things work." Mason pulled a second item from his pocket, a thick stack of folded documents, and tossed them onto the table. "I know about the civil asset forfeitures. I know about the shell companies in Delaware. I know about the $2 million your captain and your partner have embezzled over the last 4 years. The question is, how much of that money did you take, Shane?" Porter stared at the financial ledgers in utter shock. "Nothing. I swear on my life. I've been on the force for 11 months. I don't know anything about any money. Grant just makes me write the tickets and log the cash into evidence, but I never see a dime of it." Mason studied the rookie's face, pupils dilated, micro tremors in the jaw, vocal pitch elevated. He was telling the truth. He was just a terrified kid caught in a machine of corruption. "Good," Mason said softly. "That means you can still be saved." "Saved?" Porter whispered. "From what?" "From the federal indictment that is going to decimate this precinct by Friday." Mason leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "You have two choices, Shane. Option A, you remain loyal to the badge. When the FBI kicks in Captain Harrington's door, you go down as an accomplice to a RICO conspiracy, and you do 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Officer Holloway will likely pin the assault on you to save himself." Porter was hyperventilating now. "And option B? Option B, you become my asset." Mason's eyes burned into the young officer's soul. "Tomorrow morning is my mother's arraignment hearing. Captain Harrington and Officer Holloway are going to stand before the judge and lie under oath. They're going to present a falsified police report. You are going to stand up in that courtroom, hand over your unedited report, and testify exactly to what happened. You will flip on them." "Grant will kill me," Porter whispered, terrified. "He'll kill me right there in the precinct." Grant Holloway is currently sitting in his house with a disassembled service weapon, wondering who broke into his bedroom last night while he slept, Mason stated coldly. Porter stared in disbelief. The precinct had been whispering all day about Holloway coming into work looking like a paranoid, sleep-deprived lunatic, jumping at shadows. "I am offering you a lifeline, Shane, but you have to take it right now." Mason pushed a small, encrypted flash drive across the table. "This contains all the financial evidence against Harrington. I want you to officially submit this to the district attorney tomorrow morning under whistleblower protection. I will handle the physical evidence of the assault." Porter stared at the flash drive as if it were a live grenade. He thought of his fiancée, his crippling student debt, and the idealism that had once made him want to be a cop, an idealism Holloway had systematically beaten out of him. He thought of the sweet old woman bleeding on the pavement. Porter reached out with a trembling hand and took the flash drive. "Okay, I'll do it. But Harrington has the judge in his pocket. Judge Franklin Ames. They play golf together. He rubber stamps all of Harrington's warrants." Mason's expression did not change, but a dangerous glint sparked in his eyes. "Leave the judge to me." As he stood to leave, he looked down at the broken rookie. "If you run, Shane, or if you warn them, I will find you, and I won't be polite about it." Mason walked out into the rain, the bell chiming behind him. The chessboard was set. He had the cyber evidence. He had the star witness. And he had Holloway on the verge of psychological collapse. All that remained was to spring the trap in open court, where the arrogant men of the Somerville Police Department would learn that absolute power was merely an illusion. The morning of the arraignment, a thick, rolling fog blanketed the manicured grounds of the Eagle's Nest Country Club. At 6:15 a.m., the sprawling 18-hole golf course was entirely deserted, save for one man. The Honorable Judge Franklin Ames, a silver-haired patrician who had presided over the Somerville Municipal Court for 2 decades, stood on the putting green of the 9th hole. He was a man who enjoyed his routines, oblivious to the fact that his carefully constructed world of judicial impunity was about to collapse. Ames lined up a 12-foot putt, the dew soaking the cuffs of his expensive tailored slacks. He pulled the putter back, but before he could follow through, a golf ball rolled out of the heavy mist, gently knocking his own off course. Ames frowned, looking up sharply. "Excuse me, the course is closed until 7. Out of the fog emerged Master Sergeant Mason Ellison. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that somehow made his massive muscular frame look even more intimidating. He did not walk like a man out for a morning stroll. He moved with the measured, predatory silence of a hunter closing in on a kill. "Good morning, Franklin," Mason said, his voice carrying easily through the damp, heavy air. Ames gripped his putter tighter, instincts flaring. He was used to dealing with angry defendants, but the man standing before him emanated a terrifying aura of absolute control. "Who are you? How did you get past the gate security?" Security at the front gate is manned by a gentleman who falls asleep watching Netflix on his tablet. "It took exactly 4 seconds to bypass his booth," Mason replied smoothly, stopping 10 feet away. "I'm Mason Ellison, Ruth Ellison's son." Ames's face hardened. He recognized the name. Captain Harrington had called him the night before, warning him that the Ellison woman had a son making noise at the precinct. "Mr. Ellison, this is highly inappropriate. Approaching a sitting judge outside of a courtroom regarding an active case is a felony. I suggest you leave before I call the police." "You won't call the police," Mason said, slipping a hand inside his suit jacket. Ames flinched, but Mason only withdrew a sleek black tablet. He tapped the screen once and tossed it underhand. It landed softly on the dewy grass at Ames's feet. "Pick it up." Ames hesitated, then bent down and retrieved the tablet. The screen displayed a complex web of banking transactions, wire transfers, and offshore account numbers. "What is this?" Ames demanded, though a slight tremor had entered his voice. "That is a data map," Mason explained coldly. "To make sure I didn't miss anything, my associates utilized a variant of the NSO Group's Pegasus spyware, the same military-grade cyber intelligence tool used by foreign intelligence agencies to clone personal devices. We cross-referenced your metadata with a Palantir analytical sweep of Captain Harrington's financial records." Ames turned pale. The tablet shook in his hands. "We found the Cayman Island accounts, Franklin," Mason continued, taking a slow step forward. "We found the Shell Corporation registered to your wife's maiden name. We know that every time Captain Harrington seized cash from a minority driver on the highway, 20% of it was washed through a real estate LLC and deposited directly into your retirement portfolio. You've been rubber stamping his illegal search warrants and burying excessive force complaints in exchange for a piece of the pie. This is illegally obtained evidence," Ames stammered, his legal mind frantically searching for a defense. "It's inadmissible in any court. I'm not a cop, Franklin. I don't care about admissibility." Mason's voice dropped to a dangerous, gravelly whisper. "I'm a Tier 1 operator for the United States military. I operate outside the boundaries of your broken judicial system. But more importantly, I have a friend at the Department of Justice who is absolutely salivating over this data packet. If I press one button, this entire dossier goes directly to the FBI's Public Corruption Unit in Charleston." Ames swallowed hard. The morning chill suddenly felt like a freezing vice around his chest. "What do you want? At 9 o'clock this morning, my mother is being arraigned in your courtroom," Mason said. "Captain Harrington and Officer Holloway are going to present a fabricated police report. I am bringing in outside counsel. When my lawyer introduces surprise evidence and a surprise witness, Captain Harrington is going to object. If you sustain his objection, I will destroy your life by noon. You will lose your pension, your freedom, and your legacy. You will die in a federal penitentiary." Mason took one final step, closing the distance, towering over the corrupt judge. "But if you overrule Harrington, if you let the trap snap shut on those two animals, I will accidentally lose the hard drive containing your offshore transactions. You'll be forced into early retirement, but you'll keep your freedom. Do we understand each other?" Ames looked into Mason's eyes and saw no bluff, no hesitation, only the cold mechanical certainty of a man who dealt in life and death. The judge slowly nodded. "We understand each other." "Good," Mason said, turning his back and walking away into the mist. "Don't miss your tea time, Franklin." At 8:45 a.m., the heavy oak doors of the Somerville Municipal Court swung open. The courtroom was packed. Word had leaked through the precinct that the Ellison case was going to be a media circus. Mason wheeled his mother down the center aisle. Ruth looked incredibly frail, her arm strapped in a heavy sling, a white bandage covering the stitches over her swollen, blackened eye. Yet she sat perfectly straight in the wheelchair, dressed in her best Sunday floral dress, clutching a worn leather Bible in her good hand. She possessed a quiet, unshakable dignity that commanded the silent respect of every civilian in the gallery. At the plaintiff's table sat Captain Royce Harrington and Officer Grant Holloway. Harrington looked supremely confident in his Class A dress uniform, whispering something to the municipal prosecutor. Holloway, however, looked like a man slowly losing his mind. His uniform was wrinkled. Deep dark bags hung under his bloodshot eyes. He was violently bouncing his leg under the table, his head constantly swiveling as if expecting an ambush. When his eyes landed on Mason, Holloway completely froze. A wave of pure, visceral terror washed over the officer's face. He remembered the disassembled gun. He remembered the photograph. He knew the ghost from his bedroom was the man pushing the wheelchair. Mason did not sit at the defense table. He parked his mother's wheelchair next to it, kissed the top of her head, and took a seat in the front row of the gallery, arms crossed. At the defense table stood Cole Bennett, a high-powered, ruthless civil rights litigator flown in directly from the law firm of Benjamin Crump. Bennett was a shark in a tailored suit, adjusting his glasses and organizing his files with predatory calm. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Franklin Ames took the bench. He looked pale, avoiding eye contact with both Harrington and the gallery. He banged his gavel once. "Court is in session. The State versus Ruth Ellison. Assault on a police officer. Resisting arrest. Prosecution, call your first witness." The prosecutor stood. "The State calls Officer Grant Holloway." Holloway swallowed hard, hands trembling as he walked to the witness stand. He swore on the Bible, carefully avoiding looking at Ruth. "Officer Holloway," the prosecutor began, "could you recount the events of Tuesday evening regarding the defendant?" Holloway cleared his throat, voice cracking slightly. I initiated a traffic stop for a broken taillight. The suspect, Ms. Ellison, was uncooperative. I asked her to step out of the vehicle. She refused and became combative. When I attempted to detain her, she struck me in the chest. I was forced to use an approved takedown maneuver to subdue her. "Thank you, officer. No further questions." Cole Bennett stood, buttoning his suit jacket. He walked slowly toward the witness stand. "Officer Holloway, you claim a 72-year-old woman weighing barely 130 pounds struck you with enough force to require a violent takedown. Adrenaline makes people unpredictable." Holloway repeated the line Harrington had drilled into him. "I see. And it was just a coincidence that your body camera malfunctioned at the exact moment this alleged assault took place." "It was raining," Holloway said, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "Water got into the casing." "No further questions for this witness, Your Honor," Bennett said smoothly, turning to the judge. "However, the defense would like to call a hostile witness to the stand, Officer Shane Porter." A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom. Captain Harrington leaped to his feet, face flushing red. "Objection, Your Honor. Officer Porter is not on the witness list. This is an ambush." Judge Ames looked at Harrington, then passed him to the front row of the gallery. Mason Ellison was staring back at him, expression carved from stone. Ames swallowed hard and struck his gavel. "Objection overruled. The court will allow the witness. Bailiff, bring in Officer Porter." Harrington's jaw dropped. He stared at the judge in utter betrayal, realizing the protective umbrella over his precinct had just vanished. The courtroom doors opened, and Officer Shane Porter walked in. He was not in uniform. He wore a simple civilian suit, looking absolutely terrified but resolute. He took the stand and was sworn in. "Officer Porter," Bennett began, "were you present during the arrest of Ruth Ellison?" "I was," Porter said, his voice echoing in the dead silent room. "Did Ms. Ellison strike Officer Holloway?" Porter closed his eyes for a second, Drawing a deep breath, he opened them and looked directly at Ruth. No, sir. She was completely compliant. Officer Holloway pulled her from the vehicle without provocation, dislocated her shoulder, and drove her head into the pavement. It was unprovoked and brutal. Pandemonium erupted in the courtroom. "Liar!" Holloway screamed from the plaintiff's table, jumping to his feet. "He's lying. He's trying to save his own skin." "Order! Order in my courtroom!" Judge Ames bellowed, hammering his gavel. "Your Honor," Bennett spoke over the noise, his voice booming. "The defense would like to submit Exhibit A into evidence. It is a flash drive provided by Officer Porter to the district attorney this morning under the Whistleblower Protection Act. It contains the original unedited police report as well as financial ledgers proving Captain Harrington and Officer Holloway have been embezzling seized civil forfeiture funds for 4 years. Harrington panicked. He lunged toward the prosecutor, grabbing his arm. "Do something! Shut this down!" "There's more, Your Honor," Bennett said, pulling a small remote from his pocket and pointing it at the television monitor mounted on the courtroom wall. "We also recovered the Bodycam footage that Captain Harrington illegally deleted from the Axon servers." Bennett pressed play. The brutal high-definition video of the assault played for the entire courtroom. The sight of the massive officer brutalizing the frail elderly woman was shocking enough, but the audio, Ruth's agonizing scream as her bones snapped, made several people in the gallery gasp in horror. Ruth looked down, tears falling onto her Bible. Mason reached over the railing and gently placed his large, scarred hand over hers. When the video ended, the courtroom was submerged in a suffocating silence. Judge Ames looked down from the bench, his face grim. "Officer Holloway, Captain Harrington, based on the overwhelming evidence presented and the federal warrants I was informed were filed this morning, I am dismissing all charges against Ruth Ellison with extreme prejudice." Ames looked at the bailiffs standing by the doors. "Bailiffs, place Captain Harrington and Officer Holloway under arrest for perjury, aggravated assault, and conspiracy to commit fraud." "No!" Holloway screamed. His mind, already fractured by Mason's psychological warfare, completely snapped. He shoved the prosecutor out of the way and bolted toward the center aisle, desperately trying to reach the exit. He did not make it 2 steps. Mason moved with a speed that defied his massive size. He vaulted the wooden railing of the gallery, intercepting the fleeing officer. Holloway threw a wild, desperate punch. Mason did not even blink. He parried the strike effortlessly, grabbed Holloway by the collar and the belt, and slammed him face first onto the heavy oak plaintiff's table with earth-shattering force. The wood splintered under the impact. Before Holloway could even process the pain, Mason had the officer's arm wrenched up behind his back at a terrifying angle, pinning him completely to the splintered wood. Mason leaned down, lips inches from Holloway's ear. "Stop resisting," he whispered, echoing the very words Holloway had used on his mother. The bailiffs rushed forward, snapping handcuffs onto Holloway's wrists. At the back of the courtroom, the heavy doors opened, and 4 men in FBI windbreakers walked in. Special agents had arrived to take Captain Harrington into federal custody. Harrington did not fight. He hung his head in defeat as they slapped the cuffs on him. The corrupt machine of the Somerville Police Department had been dismantled in under 48 hours. Mason stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. He walked back to his mother's wheelchair. The courtroom was in a state of stunned awe, watching the giant of a man gently kneel beside the battered elderly woman. "It's over, Mama," Mason said softly, wiping a tear from her unbruised cheek. "They can't hurt anyone else ever again. Let's go home." Ruth smiled, her grip tightening on her son's hand. "You kept your promise, Mason. You did it by the book." Mason offered a small, rare smile. "Just like you taught me, Mama." As Mason wheeled his mother down the aisle, the gallery erupted into spontaneous applause. Officer Shane Porter watched them leave, knowing his career in Somerville was over. But for the first time in his life, he felt like a real cop. Mason Ellison walked out into the bright morning sun, the ghost who had stepped out of the shadows just long enough to bring the full weight of a son's love down upon the wicked. If the adrenaline was still pumping through your veins and your heart was racing as Master Sergeant Mason Ellison delivered absolute, uncompromising justice to those corrupt officers, you are not alone. True power is not about wearing a badge to bully the weak. It is about having the strength to protect them when the system fails. Ruth Ellison survived because she raised a warrior who knew exactly how to fight back. If this story of righteous vengeance, tactical brilliance, and a son's unbreakable love for his mother kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. Share it with someone who loves a brilliant plot twist. And don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping real-life drama stories. Let us know in the comments. What was your favorite moment of Mason's revenge?